We've known it's been coming for some time. The new Russian offensive has begun. A large number of missile strikes. Operator Starsky has pointed out that it's on the day that he's coming to in time. I swear to God, it has nothing to do with us. Thanks for that connection there. But the offensive has begun, and at the same time, Elon Musk has said that Starlink is being rolled back for military use across the Ukraine, and has suggested that there will be further rollbacks coming in this utterly critical service. We will be discussing that and more with Operator Starsky. This is the Rundown. Hello, thank you all for joining us. Now we've got Starsky here we've got his thumbnail in two windows. But I think, and not that I'm like anybody would mistake me for a professional in this, but maybe let's see if we can get his camera in the center there. So let me swap that out, and let's get you in there. Also with us is Commander McMillan. So McMillan, Operator Starsky, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Are you hearing him as garbled as I'm hearing him?
Oh yeah, big time.
Okay.
Again, all right. Let me
Yeah, whatever communication security crypto you're using, you need to swap it out. You're using yesterday's ciphers.
All right. Well, I will work on that. Starsky, can you get us? Can you tell us what's been going on this week?
Yeah, I think I know why you're gargled. Is because Kremlin watches our show, and because you communicate with Kremlin and coordinate missile strikes on Ukraine every time we have this show. Probably you have like double. You know the. You know what I mean.
Yeah, but
because Nick is the only person except me who speaks Russian here.
Yeah, it's a crowded room. It's amazing how few of the people in here speak Russian. Only 2/3 of them.
Oh well. So can you tell us what's going on, sir?
Да, конечно. Значит, дело было так.
По-английски, пожалуйста. Я не знаю, почему мы так сделать. Спасибо большое. По-английски.
Okay. So,
what?
We had a crazy day. Okay, because it started tonight with multiple missile strikes on different cities. We know that there were missile strike in I think Zaporizhia and Kharkiv. There were actually multiple missile strikes involving S-300 missiles. We know that Russia has plenty of those, and there were drones used as well. Tonight there were quite a few drones intercepted over Kiev. We know that at least 2 hit their targets, but majority were intercepted. Also, this morning the massive missile strike happened. We know that Russians used 2 groups of strategic bombers that were shooting missiles from the direction of Volgodonsk as well as Caspian Sea, and we know that later Russian fleet joined them, and they were shooting the Caliber cruise missiles, ship-based missiles, and in general around 71 missiles were detected. We know that 61 missile was intercepted by Ukrainian anti-air defense. we see that in order to hit only 10 targets in Ukraine, Russians keep launching almost 10 times as much missiles, hoping that at least 10 of them will, 10-20% of them will reach their targets. And we know that in Kiev specifically, there one person was wounded. We know that cruise missile, the debris from the intercepted cruise missile hit residential building and damaged a car. And another news regarding this missile strike is 2 missiles crossed the airspace of Moldova, and 2 Romanian interceptors were scrambled because those missiles were heading towards Romanian border. 2 Romanian interceptors that were performing some training tasks were basically used to observe the situation, and Romanian Ministry of Defense claims that those missiles never crossed the border with Romania. They never entered the Romanian airspace, but Moldova already called Russian ambassador for explanation, because it's a fact. It was confirmed that those missiles were flying over the territory of Moldova this time. So we will expect further reaction from the Romanian Ministry of Defense as well as other NATO members, because it's not a joke. There are, and it wasn't for the first time when Russian missiles were penetrating into the territory of other countries. So we will see what happens next.
Is my audio doing any better or no?
Yeah.
All right.
At least from my perspective, it is.
Oh, Commander 𝐒𝐚𝐬 can hear me just fine, so crap. At any rate, it's the only one I was trying to fix it so Starsky could hear. Yeah, I can talk to you anytime I want to. So, we know that it looks like they are moving in from the Luhansk area. It looks like Russia has begun in the last 24 hours its major push heading west from Luhansk. This is something that we've talked about and everyone has anticipated. I assume, in as much as you can discuss it, I assume that this is something that the Ukrainian army has prepared for and is expecting at this point what is going to be the first major offensive of the year. Is that what they're anticipating?
Yes, of course, we were preparing for this. We know that yesterday as much as 19 Russian attacks were deflected by Ukrainian defenders. We know that currently, even though they brought a lot of manpower, but still they achieved 0 success in that area. And we expect them to bring more troops and more armored vehicles, but we are prepared for that.
In September of last year, Elon Musk sent a letter to the Department of Defense, to the Pentagon, asking, let me rephrase that, saying that he would withdraw Starlink if they did not start paying an estimated $150 million for the rest of the year and an estimated $800 million for the next year to cover the Starlink costs in Ukraine. We don't know how the Pentagon responded. The Pentagon has said that they had discussed things with him. Shortly after that, he made a suggestion on Twitter that the best way to end the war was to cede Crimea and to have a vote in the occupied areas as to whether they want to stay in Russia or go to Ukraine. This was met with considerable backlash from basically everybody in the vicinity of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany told Elon Musk specifically to fuck off. Elon Musk then replied when there was concerns about Starlink not operating at its full capacity in Ukraine, said that he was doing specifically as the the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany recommended, and he was fucking off with Starlink. Earlier this week, Elon Musk said that Elon Musk confirmed that Starlink has been dramatically reduced for military usage. He has claimed that he was unaware that it had been being used for offensive military actions, or nothing there is offensive. Yeah, I think exactly.
Shocking.
There's gambling going on at this establishment, despite the fact that his letter to the Pentagon in September explicitly stated that it was he wanted compensation for the offensive military use and for the governmental use. So he's already acknowledged that he knew this. What effect has the reduction in Starlink? So it's now been confirmed that they have reduced Starlink specifically. Somehow they claim to be able to understand, to be able to determine when it's being used by the military, and it's specifically military that's seen its reductions. Have you noticed these reductions? Has anyone in the military noticed these reductions, and how are they affecting you?
Well, I can tell you that uploading speed sucked, and it still sucks. So nothing changed much, but I'm using civilian Starlink. We know that military Starlinks, those that are used by Ukrainian militaries, that were delivered by Pentagon and by the USAID, they have different registration. So basically, using this registration, they can reduce the quality of communication. So I have a suspicion that the Starlink that is used by our troops, they have better upload speed, because I remember first time I started using Starlink last year around March, April, something like that, in spring, basically. And the speed was so great, and I'm talking about the upload speed. So I could upload like 1 gigabyte videos in a couple of minutes. I might be wrong, of course, because I could have been connected to some other Wi-Fi, but I think it was specifically Starlink. It didn't take much time to upload huge files. The one that I'm using now, it requires something like half an hour to upload a big file, because the upload speed of Starlink is something like 5 megabits per second on average, which is so bad. So I have difficulties having streams and things like that. They are good for downloading information, but not as much for uploading. So we will see. Of course, it will be, I would say, big blow on Ukrainian troops, because again, those Starlinks are needed for our communication, and our press service, of course, uses Starlink. So, I mean, it's not like Ukraine is invading Rostov Oblast to consider using our Starlink in for military purpose as offensive, because Ukraine still defends even when we counterattack, but we do that on Ukrainian territory, and we still defend Ukraine. It's not like we're invading Voronezh, because it's the last place on earth I would honestly like to invade. Moscow too. I've been to Moscow, and I don't really like this place. They have very, very expensive tea, like 10 times more expensive than in Kiev. It's crazy. That's why I think they don't drink tea much, preferring other liquids. But anyways,
very subtle.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, and one of the examples that they gave was, I guess that the Starlink is being used to help guide artillery, so that they can get drones to spot an area for artillery, and without that, they can't do any of the artillery that's been hitting the supply lines by the way, in Ukraine. So these are Ukrainians who are using Starlink to attack targets that are in Ukraine. They're not attacking targets in other countries. They're attacking targets in their own country. It's just because that it's invaders. I understand calling it offensive, but we also know that Elon Musk has known for quite some time how it's being used. Commander, what do you think is motivating Musk in this regard? I understand money being some motive. Starlink is, in fact, extraordinarily expensive. He has demanded money from the Pentagon. Apparently, nobody... At first, these were donations. He said there'd be donations, and now after the fact, he's like, well, if you want to see it continue, now that you've had a taste. What are your thoughts on Musk's activity? And before you answer that, actually, I also want to remind our audience, Musk also, shortly after taking over at Twitter, did in fact remove Ukraine as a list of countries that Twitter could verify from. It was not recognized as a country by Twitter, meaning if you were in Ukraine, you couldn't verify your own accounts, meaning you couldn't use a Ukrainian phone number to use two-factor authentication to get into your account, and you couldn't list Ukraine as your account country of origin. So, and this was a change made after Musk took over. So, any thoughts on what Musk is thinking and or doing here, Commander?
I think it's purely speculative what his motive is. I won't say that somebody in the FSB has video imagery of him snorting coke off the half-eaten corpse of a baby while he's having sex with a pig, but you never know. These things might exist.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're not saying what you literally just said.
I'm not saying there's compromise on the man. Not at all.
Okay.
I would never imply such a thing.
All right. Oh, hold on. My phone is going off like crazy. Hold on. And I just lost my Twitter account. What? I'm sorry.
Also, it can be a dead pig. It changes a lot in this situation.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, because nobody's surprised by coke and having sex with pigs, but I think the dead one. Again, I'm not claiming that this is fact, but I'm claiming that this can be possible, right? Because we all know that FSB uses all kinds of methods. So I've stolen your speech, Commander.
Oh, that's okay. We've definitely descended into the rabbit hole meets Starsky and Suitor category of life.
Hold on, our secretary keeps track of the number of incoming libel suits, and apparently she just quit. She's like, there's too many. there's the libel. All right. So okay. So you have the dead pig theory, compromise. Which, by the way, I mean, you've made some very good arguments for. One of the things that ticks me off about conspiracy theories is that it makes it very difficult when you have very plausible scenarios that sound an awful lot like a conspiracy theory to somebody who doesn't really understand how these things work. Sure. The reality is, we know that the FSB has and Soviet Union before that has had an interest in anybody who is has any influence or power in the U.S. And if you visit Russia, you're going to be tailed, you're going to be followed, and they're going to try to get compromising material on you. And Trump is absolutely no exception. It's not that they thought he was going to be president. They just knew he was influential. And we have reason to believe that they did, in fact, get compromising information on him when he visited Russia. We've talked about that, and that's already, that came out, I think, 2 weeks ago. An article came out where they said that they actually have files on him from FSB agents who said, yeah, we've got stuff on him. We've had it for quite some time. This doesn't mean that he's necessarily a puppet per se, taking his marching orders from them, but it does mean that he's careful around them at a minimum, and their interests are always somewhere in the back of his mind. And, I don't think that's a huge stretch. We've got a lot to go with on that. So there's certainly the same possibility with Musk. Do we have any other theories that don't include dead pigs, out of curiosity?
Sure. One, I think you touched on, and I think it's a valid one. Starlink is very expensive. I suspect that when he made his generous offer of, free use of Starlink, he had no idea that this conflict was going to last anywhere near as long as it did. And so at some point, just like probably is the case with many philanthropists, you say, ooh, this is getting a little more expensive than I want, so he wants to back out. So he tries to do it in a way that doesn't make him look bad by approaching the government or various governments and say, hey, look, I'll continue doing this if you'll fund it, and nobody's willing to pick up the bill. So he's just going, well, so long, guys, I'm walking. And that's a possibility. I think there's also the possibility that as a Western oligarch, if you will, one of the 1%, as we've taken to calling them, he may be influenced by, friends and people in those circles who don't necessarily want to see A, the war end quickly, or B, don't want to see the Ukrainians victorious in all this. So I think all of these are certainly potential options that are going on in this thing.
So money, friends who want to see the war continue, and dead pig are the three theories that we have. The dead pig being Starsky's contribution to the I think that's the variant that I like the most.
Good as any.
So, well, I'll point out that if instead of spending $44 billion on Twitter, he decided to spend $1 billion on Starlink, which it's less than that, but if he spent $1 billion a year on Starlink, I think he'd be doing a lot more to help society, and all of Twitter would be breathing a sigh of relief if he had spent it on that instead of buying Twitter. But spilt milk, I suppose. Any possibility that the U.S. government will pick up the tab if he truly pulls? How much is that to the U.S. military, and do you think we are committed enough that the U.S. government would pay some or all of that tab if money really is the biggest issue with Starsky? So with Starsky, I'm sorry, I was looking at Starsky. I said sorry. Whoa, with
Starsky's an expensive commodity.
Starsky's. Yeah, Starsky's. Listen, Andrea, I personally would pay $1 billion a show to have you on, but I don't have that kind of money. So if the U.S. government was willing to pick up, what do you think, Commander, that the U.S. government would be willing to pick up that tab, if in part or in whole?
I honestly can't say. I think a lot of it would be contingent on the Ukrainian government / Ukrainian military saying that they thought it was such a valuable asset that they wanted to see the service continue, and that they would ask that funding be provided to ensure that it does.
All right. Yeah.
I just can't see them voluntarily saying, "Oh yeah, we'll cough up the money," when they may not see that it's worth the bang for the buck. But the key is whether Ukraine thinks it's worth the bang for the buck on that.
And now Germany is now sending. It's not the Leopard 2s. Is it the Panther that they're now saying that they're going to send? Is that? Did I read that correctly?
I haven't heard that. The Panther actually, my understanding is, it's not completely out of development yet. So if they're going to send them, it's going to take a while to get there. I think what they are planning is sending is a bunch of Leopard 1s. I've heard over 100 were possibly headed in Ukraine's direction. It's not the same as a Leopard 2. Obviously, doesn't have the capabilities. It's a much older tank, but it's definitely a useful asset to have. It's not a bad tank. There are still a number of countries that have it in their militaries and frontline service.
So, Operator Starsky, we are going to be having an interview on Monday with Mars. He is the head of the memorial for the International Defenders of Ukraine, which is a memorial that's been established for foreign fighters who come to Ukraine and unfortunately do not survive, but who fight on behalf of Ukraine. Have you met very many volunteers from other countries? And if so, what's your experience of them been?
I met a lot of them. There were volunteers from basically every country of the European Union, North America, the UK. So there were a lot of volunteers. I talked to volunteers that are actually fighting. I talked to volunteers that provide psychological relief. I talked to guys who do demining. They were removing mines and shells in 𝐒𝐲𝐜𝐸. Currently, I think they work in a different region. So there were a lot of people, and also very important, I would say, field for them is basically this psychological relief, because there's a lot of people who not only require humanitarian aid, but also psychological help, because a lot of them lost their home, their relatives, children or parents. And for example, in 𝐒𝐲𝐜𝐸, I saw a lot of those volunteers. There were even not organizations, but just people who arrived to Ukraine to try to help, do whatever they can. There was this Irishman, Aiden, I think, from Ireland. He wanted to help rebuild the school. I think he had some experience in construction works, and he had some funds. So he talked to the principal of the school in 𝐒𝐲𝐜𝐸, asking whether he can help. And there's a lot of people, and also one of even more important, I would say, topics that we gotta talk about is people who fight not on the front lines, but in the media, in people's minds. Those people who protect international community from Russian propaganda. That is very, very important. We can also mention NAFO, we can mention Leaf Spring Army, and all the good people out there who follow the updates, follow the news, who understand the situation. So they're doing a very, very nice job.
Absolutely. Thank God for that. The Russian propaganda machine is. I remember. So I did work as a political operative. I worked the highest end work I did was for the Obama campaign, and I remember the first thing we became aware of when we're trying to elect Barack Obama against Hillary Clinton was the realization that the Clinton campaign had the single largest political machine engine in human history in terms of what it could do to influence people and how big it was. And it was a nightmare, and it was practiced, and it was sharpened and honed from an entire Clinton dynasty. And I remember thinking that it was impossible to fight this huge thing. And now, as I've become much more aware of how sharpened the Russian propaganda machine is, not by years or even decades, but generations of practice and skill at this. Macmillan, any thought? I mean, am I using hyperbole when I say that? Do you think, Commander? Did we? We may have lost.
I think Commander doesn't have his mic.
I had muted myself.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Am I using hyperbole when I say? Yeah.
No, please. I don't think so. I think your statement is entirely valid. I think if you go back into Tsarist times, it was crude and clumsy, but it was definitely there. And if you look at similar efforts at propaganda by, Britain or France or Germany in the years leading up to World War I, theirs was similarly crude and clumsy. But I would argue that as time progressed, the Russians became absolute masters at churning this stuff out. Now, admittedly, much of it is targeted at a domestic audience, but when you consider how many, foreign communist parties there were in virtually every country who were all motivated by that same propaganda, it had some success overseas as well.
I agree on that. The difference between Russia and the rest of the world, rest of the civilized world, is that on the West, people realized, as well as in Europe, people realized that, let's say, correct and proper public relations is 100 times better than propaganda. Because you don't have to create bullshit. You just tell the truth. That's it. You just communicate with people. And proper communication is always the key to finding any sort of solution in any situation. While in Russia, they use like 10% truth to make it look legit, and 90% bullshit, which is pure bullshit. And this is how they do that. And the worst thing is that we have social media, we have websites that can be used as channels of communication in public relations, right? That's what we always did. but Russians exploit it to share bullshit and conspiracy theories and their propaganda, basically. That's why we need to evaluate and I think assess what we can change now, because when you give freedom to terrorists to do whatever they want to do, they will exploit every opportunity to benefit their terror. That's all. Social media exists because we have freedom of speech. Everybody can say in the social media whatever he or she wants, but if terrorists use it for propaganda of terrorism, what should we do? I mean, it's a very hard question, and Russian terrorists basically brought us some new problem that we have to solve now, I think. Because 3 days ago in Ukraine, Security Service of Ukraine raided an undercover base that in a private apartment, basically, that was used by pro-Russian activists that were controlled by FSB as a bot farm, and they confiscated more than 2,000 SIM cards, which means that they had more than 2,000 unique accounts in the social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where they could share whatever they wanted, but whatever they were told to share. So how do we fight this? I mean, having a couple of channels of communication where we can share our thoughts, our information, and have feedback from public, while they can use just massive accounts to report our channels, to spread their bullshit, to overwhelm commentaries with their propaganda, their spam and things like that. So it's a very serious question, because we entered basically new era of social media, where security must be considered, but at the same time we shouldn't violate freedom of speech of normal people. But how do you tell normal people from terrorists and propagandists?
Well, if they have 2,000 SIM cards, I think that's a pretty good indicator of which one you're dealing with. But I agree with you. It's a bigger. I don't mean to make light of. I think you're right. I think you brought up another point which I've seen firsthand, which is the brigading, where if there's a channel, say on YouTube, that is attempting to bring information, the bots will mass flag it. It'll get taken down, and YouTube hasn't always been the greatest at identifying when somebody is giving misinformation versus when they're trying to, say, rebut misinformation, and they take the number of flags into account. Well, 3,000 people with Russian accents all say that this is a bad website, so it must be a bad website, and they're aggressively going after those who are trying to get good and accurate information out there, as well as doing their own misinformation. I don't know. We had on Dr. John Shook, who was a philosophy professor, talking about the post-truth world and how to deal with this kind of thing. And if there's an easy answer, I don't know what it is. Any thoughts, Commander?
No, I think that's exactly on target.
All right. Well, as I said before, we're going to have on Monday, we're going to have on a volunteer. He goes to Ukraine. He was in Ukraine until, unfortunately, got very sick. He had to leave Ukraine. He was treated and is now returning to Ukraine. We're going to be interviewing him on the day before he goes back to Ukraine. He is a volunteer who helps train troops. He also does that very psychological counseling that Starsky was talking about, and he is attempting to establish a memorial for the foreign fighters who fight and die in Ukraine. We will be having that discussion 1 p.m. Eastern on Monday. For those of you who would like to join us, we've actually already spoken with him a couple of times and had some very good discussions, so I'm looking forward to that. Speaking of misinformation, one time, we had Commander McMillan on, and I suggested that I had very much enjoyed his autobiography entitled "So I Rogered a Hippo." That I say that once, and then he comes on this show and does this thing with Elon Musk. I think that's an escalation, sir. I don't think you need to bring one of the richest men alive into this, but okay, fine. I get it.
Vengeance
I probably had it coming.
Best served cold.
I did that Roger the Hippo comment like 6 months ago, and you're still okay. I get it.
I know, ages ago.
Okay. Suggest a guy is having illicit relations with a hippo, and he takes it all personal. Fine. Thank you all for joining us. If you're but please, if you like this content, share. That's probably the single best way to help us out. You can become a patron and help out too. We always we appreciate our patrons and supporters. Become a member. Like, subscribe, share. We're trying to get the Overtime channel up to 1,000 subs. That's going to make things a lot easier for us putting the different content on the different channels so people can subscribe and get the content that they want. And then join us on our Discord, where we are following this and everything else that's going on, both in the regards to the Ukraine war, in regards to the multiple earthquakes that have struck Turkey, and the precarious situation in Palestine, Ohio, where livestock are being reported dead after the collision of 100 tankers filled with chlorine gas into a gasoline or a gas station, and we're staying on it. I don't know what's going on over there. Apparently everything's okay, but livestock is dying, and it's safe is what okay. We'll stay on it. But thank you all for joining us, and so Starsky, where are you going to be next? Where can people find you?
So next, I will be joining the Shills tomorrow at 10 p.m. Kiev time. And we'll be talking shit about Elon Musk, obviously, because it's a great topic to, rant.
Well, and be sure
the
to
humor
credit.
Just writes itself.
Yeah. Be sure to credit the commander with the cocaine and dead pig thing. I'm sure he's going to. Well, he'll probably be there. So if Commander, if you join, I'll certainly try to make it. That'll be 3 p.m. Eastern for those of you who are in the U.S. and don't want to do the math yourselves. Also, links to Starsky's channel in the description if you want to go check that out. Commander McMillan's channel, which includes various wildlife, fauna, and the occasional hippo. We didn't link because we're not allowed to link OnlyFans. And I'm sorry, you've got me in a mood now. Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah.
We're going to be demonetized for life after this show. All right. I'll tell the way we are in time has been blessed to have both of you on. You are experts and with a good sense of humor, which I certainly appreciate. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, please, Starsky, stay safe. Things are ratcheting back up again, and we're all concerned for you and indeed for all of your countrymen.
Thank you so much. Stay safe too.
Thank you. And we will see you all next week. Have a good weekend all.